Please do me a favor, throughout this whole video, don't forget one thing. This is just my first impressions video after about one cycle of using the Honor 8 Pro. But it will be an extended first impressions video, which is something that I rarely do and only on devices that are special in some way or definitely well worth it, which is absolutely the case here with the Honor 8 Pro. But I also want to make one more thing sure of. Nothing I will say now and in the next following minutes is set to stone, because once I used it a few more days in daily use, with just normal user experience, things could change. But I also have to say, from my normal experience, I know, and I'm quite confident in saying that I narrow already down all the important parts right from the start without really missing anything really worth mentioning. But that's it, good for enough. I just wanted to point that out. So let's get into the design and build quality. What I definitely like here is that it is quite thin with 6.98 millimeters, even though this is pretty much 7 millimeters to me. And it is quite compact for a 5.7 incher after all, because with a 16:9 ratio, it is of course wide and one hand usability will be quite hard. But the bezels are absolutely moderate, especially on the black version, not even visible. It is actually very nice and secure to hold, since we have a little bit of a curve towards the back, but actually flat, slightly angled sides, and that makes it very comfortable but also very secure to hold. And that's quite kind of important, because the back is a little bit more on the slippery side compared to some other more grippy metal phones, but definitely feels great. And the overall in-hand feel is really nice. And that also comes to one thing, because if I talk about the fingerprint reader, it is an absolutely crazy fast one and it is super reliable. That is pretty much a given from an Honor and Huawei device, but for me, especially with my short fingers, if I normally hold it, I almost can't reach it, so I have to kind of readjust my finger position. So with people with smaller hands, or maybe just hold it like I do, it's a little bit harder to get used to. Otherwise, though, I have to say the build quality once again is super solid and it feels really premium. So that's all about to say about that. Now in terms of design, otherwise we have here the LEDs, we have the dual camera, we have an IR blaster, which is cool, we have a microphone, SD card and SIM card tray, we have the USB Type-C port, speaker on the right and the headphone jack on the left. Buttons on the right, definitely very convenient to reach, and they sound very good, very premium, even though not nearly as good as on, for example, Huawei P10, where we just had a little bit more click and of audio and tactile feedback, but totally a nice job. We have notification LED, and we also have software button, which is quite obvious. So that's pretty much all I have to say about design and build. When I'm gonna talk about the display, we have to point out one thing compared to the Huawei Mate 9. In this case, we have a Quad HD display, so 2560 by 1440. So that's why it's a little bit announced towards the VR kind of experience, which is definitely something not important for me, but it is noticeably sharper, but it's not really mind-blowingly better than, for example, on the Huawei Mate 9, but that's just because that one was an absolutely outstanding phablet display. This one, though, I have to say, very good quality, because the viewing angles are very stable, it is very bright, and the blacks are especially quite good for an IPS display with a quite solid amount of IPS glow, so really nice, and the colors definitely nicely balanced, more on the realistic side, even though not 100% accurate or something like that. It is an absolutely enjoyable display. I really love it so far. It just doesn't really blow my mind after I've seen so many amazing displays as well, but this is definitely on top of those and can compete with the very best ones without any problems. Now when it comes to the speaker, I just have to point out one thing first. It is only firing towards downside and not like on the Huawei Mate 9, also here from the earpiece, so not quite the same experience. Otherwise, I think one thing actually gets quite obvious from the video already. If you cup it, the sound gets a little bit more harsh, but if you don't cup it, it sounds a little bit muffled. So you definitely don't get the Huawei Mate 9 experience here, because even though it is quite loud, and definitely more than loud enough, it isn't quite balanced perfectly. It could feel a little bit warmer, a little bit richer, especially in terms of the mids. And like I said, it gets a little bit high and a little bit harsh on the highs when you cup it, but without it, it sounds muffled. So not perfect here. Totally good enough. Still worth it for what it is as a whole package, because still many things kind of lack here in this department, so nothing really outstandingly bad or good, so still quite on a high level after all as a main thing. Headphone jack I've already tried, and it is pretty much the same level as on the Huawei Mate 9, so a good, okay level. Definitely fine for earphones. For headphones, maybe a little bit quite hard, so not fully satisfying me, but for most people it should be fine. Now in terms of performance, here is the one thing to be definitely called out. We have 6 GB of RAM. And Huawei thinks 4 are enough. Well, Honor seems to disagree, and I gotta say they are absolutely right, because usually I don't really notice a huge difference, but combined here with the Kirin 960, I gotta say they did an absolutely amazing job, because I could use so many apps at the same time, like 10, 12, without any problems, without having to reload. And then the performance of the 960, to me, at least with this current version, feels a little bit better optimized than it was on the Huawei Mate 9, because there I saw a lot of slowdowns, which is not so much the case here. I see some minimal lag, really barely, but otherwise I gotta say we actually don't even have the high amount of pretty much no really perceivable amount of motion blur, which is something that I usually don't like to see at all. And this didn't bother me on this device, because everything feels high refresh rate, smooth, super reliable. And as I said, the multitasking is amazing. You can launch so many apps, and I've tried this in so many different instances, and it is just performing so top, so amazing. Gaming, of course, I will show it in the full review, but it is actually quite good already, because I gotta say, all the games were playable with really, really high frame rates. What I've noticed though, and I hope they can maybe fix this over time, that we had quite a lot of slowdowns in terms of frame rates. So maybe here the GPU has a little bit problem already pushing the high amount of pixel, which is after all more than on the 1080p display of the Huawei Mate 9. Battery, I didn't measure the full charge time yet, but this will come for the full review. Same as also for the battery estimate, because here I definitely don't want to say too much, but from what I see after about one cycle and already having done my YouTube test, this is what I can say. YouTube actually quite disappointing with about 13% of YouTube. I have to double check that, because this is actually quite a low value, definitely kind of already below average, which was not so much the case on the Huawei. Of course, with the 1080p it had the upper hand here, so this is a little bit on the disappointing side. Otherwise, the battery life though seems pretty much on par, which is a little bit confusing to me, to the Huawei Mate 9, because I see so far that it's possible, like let's say Wi-Fi only 7 to 8 hours with really heavy use with a lot of camera and games. I would say 6 hours, and this is pretty much what I got on the Huawei Mate 9 so far. So of course I need definitely a few more days, but it looks already definitely promising. Software. This is already running EMUI 5.1, and yes, I know I'm not using the Huawei launcher, but in the full review it will come. I just can't use it with the EMUI launcher, but otherwise you can see already 5.1, which I think not even the Mate had, because that was 5. Otherwise, what we have here, of course, we have knuckle gestures, which is cool, and you can especially here launch already the Nougat design when it comes to the split screen option, which is absolutely handy. This works way better than it did with the EMUI before. Otherwise, we have of course the navigation keys you can change, smart assistants and so on, with the floating dock that I'm not a huge fan of. But yeah, that's it. I still gotta say, I hope that they fixed, maybe already, if not, fix a few of the quirks that I had with the Huawei Mate 9 and also P10. But one thing that I can already say, which I'm super happy about, no screen dimming or anything useless and annoying like I had on the Huawei P10. Here is everything solid. The software is still not my favorite one. Some things are a little bit weird. It looks better than ever now with 5.1. It is solid, but I just hope they also, what they maybe didn't fix so much on the older versions, because on all phones that I had with EMUI 5, I had a problem of a quite flaky standby, so I will have to see about the next few days about that. Camera. Since this is the first impressions video, even though I extended, I won't show the pics, but I already did quite a lot actually. And what I can say is, selfies, not really all that impressive, because you kind of have to be at the proper distance to get a sharp picture. If you are too close, you are blurry. If you are too far away, you are blurry. So it doesn't seem to autofocus like some other, or most phones by now already do, at least the flagships. So this is a little bit disappointing. Once it gets the proper narrow or the proper focus distance, they are still, I would say, very good, not great. Low light pictures turn out quite good, not flagship like, because there are some cameras that can this a little bit better, but it's still totally solid, so they're fine. But I've also noted that the autofocus was pumpy a little bit. Pictures outdoor, I have to say, they're super nice and sharp, and I actually like the wide aperture mode if it works out correctly. I will show this in the full proper review, because I've noticed that it's a little bit of a janky thing, not fully optimized on some certain objects. It works beautifully and it makes a great effect, sometimes not so much, but great accurate colors and so on. And what I can also say already, the 4K video looks really, really good, because it's super smooth and super detailed with a high bitrate, because I did not see any artifacting and so on, which is absolutely something I did not expect from a Huawei camera when it comes to video. 1080p 60 frames or 30 frames, just forget it, because so much more noticeably sharp, or I mean less sharp, that it just makes no sense not to use 4K. So for now, what I gotta say is my kind of first impressions conclusion. Priced at around 550 euros here. It is actually a little bit higher what I wanted, because what I expected was 499 and I actually wished for 450. I gotta say though, that wasn't maybe all that realistic, because 550 here in euro would kinda actually relate to like $500 in the US, because what I've seen, for example, the Mate in the US costs 600 or something like that dollars, and it's 650 or 600 euros here. So usually even a little bit cheaper in the US, and then the value could be even better. But just think of one thing, if you compare this to the Mate 9, which is even a little bit more expensive, especially here, still noticeably more expensive. This has 6 gigabytes of RAM, so more RAM here, which was noticeably better in terms of multitasking, but we also had the higher res display, which for some reason seems to have no impact on the performance, not even on the battery so far. So I'm not quite sure how they managed it. Maybe a little bit sloppy optimization back then on the Mate 9, which they can still improve, or amazing optimization actually here. And like I said, nothing is set in stone. A few things could change. Maybe the battery life after all will disappoint, maybe especially on mobile data, or some other things will come up. Because what I've noticed, a few things, sometimes if you use the device for a little bit longer and then start a few apps, they kinda, just at the first instance, have a little bit of a slowdown, which gets away quite quickly, and then it performs just so nice, so responsive. Not maybe as crazy responsive as some Sony phones, but super on a great level. And so far, I gotta say, I'm very impressed. If I would have to point out a few things that I'm maybe not so happy with, like I said, the fingerprint reader a little bit high for me. It is a little bit on the slippery side, but still the sides are actually quite secure to hold on. Software seems solid. Display I love so far. The speakers are a little bit on the weaker side. The value is absolutely there for what you get. The camera seems top notch. There was one more thing that I was having a little bit of a tiny issue with, but since I can't remember it, it couldn't have been so important after all. But this would have been it. 12 minutes, actually not that long, but definitely I gave you more information than usually on a first impressions video. I hope this was already quite useful, but don't forget, check the full review, because there I will get into a lot more things after all, even though I did already a lot more of my testing, but then I can give you my final verdict. But what I can say so far is what I think up to this point. The Honor 8, which was kind of based on the P9, was already the better P9. And I'm pretty sure that the Honor 8 Pro is actually the better Huawei Mate 9. So they did it already twice, beating their mother company, which here in Europe is a thing. They aren't the same, they are split. But that would have been it. If this was helpful, maybe leave a like, maybe a comment and a subscription. But otherwise, have a nice day. Bye.